20 minutes, if you wish, for some Q&A.
Could you have more? Vote Pierre, son?
Yeah. We're very subtle this week.
Yeah, very subtle. Yeah, honestly.
So just put your hand up. I'll recognize. Go ahead.
Senator White, how do you feel about the issue of completely legalizing drugs, taking all restrictions at all, and perhaps even not a safe injection site where people bring illegal drugs? And what about a government administered site like they have these in England, I understand, where heroin addicts can go in and they simply sign a declaration that they're in fact an addict?
Yeah.
And it costs the government about 10 cents an injection.
Well, we have that now. It's called, I mean, anybody can go on, any opiate addict, a heroin addict, can go on a program called Methadone Now, which is a lawful drug prescribed by about 20 pharmacies in the city, distributed by 20 pharmacies in the city, and prescribed by dozens and dozens of doctors. We have that now.
Is that working yet?
Well, it works in some locations. I'll tell you, in Durham region, in Oshawa, they will tell you the methadone clinic they have there works very well. But remember, you're talking about somebody who is an addict who typically lives in a very rough lifestyle.
Well, part of that is because they have to commit crimes to get their drugs.
Well, and that's the challenge we have. So I'm not against the methadone program. I'm not against the methadone program. I am challenged by the fact that we, instead of focusing on that, which has seen some very positive success stories in Canada, instead of focusing on that, we'll focus on everything being a success story, and they're not all success stories. So the methadone program works very well. They're also looking at a program now, because methadone doesn't work for cocaine addicts. So now they have a drug that they're testing in Montreal that will actually be a replacement for cocaine, which will have similar results. So I would welcome that discussion, because we have the methadone clinics in the city now, and you don't see them, you don't hear about them. We don't have crime rates through the roof next to the methadone clinic, right? I would welcome those discussions. I don't welcome the insight discussion.
Did you hear this statement that the war on drugs has failed miserably? I would have to agree to have police officers putting their lives on the line to try and control these substances that everybody seems to want.
But you know what though? Yeah, you have to go to countries where drugs, drugs are legal in Mexico, right? They are. And there's more than a few people getting killed on the streets in Mexico about drugs.
Well, it's more the black market.
I understand that, but we have to understand that the impact doesn't end because you legalize it. It doesn't end. We have more people killed. Sorry, no, I got it. Relax. Do you know how many people get killed drunk driving in the city of Ottawa every year? And alcohol is legal. I mean, the answer can't be legalize everything. Pragmatic people sometimes give up. That's what it'll turn into. Sorry. I'm Verne. Vote Pierre.
I'm from Western Canada, so I fully agree with the abolition of the gun registry. The only confusion I have is that all these chiefs of police across Canada are suddenly for it now. So I'm a little confused about that word. We're for it.
Well, the Chiefs, it doesn't matter if they're for it, it's gone, right? I can be for many things. If it's not with me, then it doesn't matter.
Well, why did they change their...
Well, police chiefs were for the long gun registry when it was introduced as well. I mean, police officers, the challenge most of us have, and I have in particular, is that we sold the long gun registry as a $1 million fix. Well, okay. Most people, if a voluntary registry was up, would have registered their weapons. They said that in surveys. And maybe that would have been the answer back in 1995, honestly. The challenge we have is that we focused on a long gun registry as it making us safer in Canada, and it didn't make us any safer. If you want to fight gun crime in this country, right, fight gun crime. Long gun registry didn't fight gun crime. So when it was in place, and we had a chief in Toronto who was very loud about it, not all chiefs agreed with him, I didn't agree with him. Rick Hansen in Calgary didn't agree with him, the guy in Swift Current didn't agree. Lots of chiefs didn't agree with him. But he was the president of the association speaking publicly for the association. So you expect he had the highest platform. But the truth is, what we should be focusing on is gun crimes. The year of the gun, 2007 I think it was in Toronto, all the homicides, I think it was 31 or 32 that were committed with guns, not one of them was committed with a gun that was owned by the person who used it. Not one. So it wasn't a long gun registry issue. And I think many people were afraid to speak loudly against it because it makes it look like makes it look like you want a rifle hanging in your back window. You're from Alberta, you probably do, but the rest of us don't, right? Back of the truck. But that's most, for most Canadians who are against the registry, they were even afraid to speak about it. And typically, when you talk about these things, there are people out there who will throw stones at your beliefs, not just your belief in this, your beliefs. And that's a challenge for us. So I do think, look, the registry is gone. It'll never come back. There are some segments who would like to have seen it go further. I'm not one of the thinks it should have gone further. That was enough. They don't need to have a registry of my 410 shotgun, my 20 gauge, and my 30-06. They don't need it. It doesn't help them. It doesn't make it safer. And at the end of the day, if they had a voluntary registry, I may or may not throw them into the system in case they get stolen. That's my choice then. But I think this really came down to Canadians who were being treated like criminals when they didn't do anything criminal. And we have thousands of people right now with criminal records for administrative breaches. Forgot to change my address when I moved. Forgot to register after fires because I didn't send you a notification at one point. I mean, there's a number of people out there who have a criminal record as a result, and they were never criminals. And honestly, we were treating them like they were, and it was unfair. We should have focused, we should focus on those who are committing crimes with guns. That's what we should focus on.
Get ready, it's Harry.
Oh, yeah, here we go. Where's your hat? Put your hat on. You got your hat. He's got a Vote Pierre hat.
Yeah.
Senator,
Yes.
I'm wondering what we could do to give better protection to policemen so they don't get killed when they go on the job.
This is a two-part question, isn't it? Okay.
What do you think we could do?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think, number of police officers killed in Canada, one is too many, I get that. But we have probably one of the safest societies of a population of 35 million people in the country. We have one of the lowest crime rates, some of the safest cities. And I don't like to compare to the US, but they're that close. We need to sometimes. Baltimore, 600,000 people, 500 homicides a year. Number of police officers a year. Salt Lake City, which is a fairly safe city, has 3 or 4 officers killed every year in the city of Salt Lake. I think we do a lot of what we can do to keep our officers safe. I think our biggest challenges probably are in isolated communities where lots of times officers are attending calls by themselves out of necessity, not necessarily because they feel they're going there safely. I think my old employer, the RCMP, has grown leaps and bounds in 10 years at fixing the isolation piece, but it's still a challenge. I think from an equipment perspective, there's nobody better equipped than we are in this country when it comes to policing. I think we recruit extremely well. We recruit very educated, and I don't mean doctorates, I mean educated, smart people who want to be police officers and serve their community. I think, there's always one thing we could do more and I'll miss it, but I think we do an awful lot to make sure that our officers are working in safe environments today.
A subsequent question,
I knew that.
Mr. Chairman.
He's got a gun rack.
Okay,
I'm not surprised.
I've done a little research, and I'm told by someone in the Justice Department that the law for killing a police officer is still death. Okay, it wasn't taken off. It was taken off for other people. Killing a policeman is still there. And I think we should do something to make sure the judges apply it.
Yeah, that's not true. There is no capital punishment in Canada regardless of who it is. Now, for killing a police officer, though, it's first degree. So the legislation is different for killing a police officer, in that if you kill a police officer, it's first degree murder.
So,
Whereas killing someone else could be second degree.
what's the penalty?
Life, no eligibility for 25 years. And realistically, it's always a bit of a misnomer. Because it says no eligibility for 25 years doesn't mean people get out at 25 years. Bernardo will never get out of jail, right? That's Olson would never have got out of jail. I'm glad his last hobby piece was a coffin, but what's that? He got his pension for short-lived though, not very short-lived.
You need some kind
Pardon
of
the pun.
deterrent. You need a stronger deterrent.
Well, I tell you though, I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced that having capital punishment for shooting a police officer. I get the punishment piece. I don't think it'll deter. Realistically, I'm not suggesting that it would be a deterrent against people killing police officers. Anyway, go. Bill's a taskmaster, man.
Yeah.
But no, it's
It's a tough crowd.
a good, great crowd.
Yeah, so much.
Thank you. I'm going to change the subject.
Okay.
I am the chairman of the Muslim Community Council of Ottawa Gatineau. And I believe you're familiar with the Muslim community
Yep, very much.
here in Ottawa.
Yep.
About 10% of the population. And Canada-wide, we are 5% of the population.
Yep.
And we perceive that the Conservative Party's attitude towards Muslims is negative, contrary to the Canadian public opinion, which shows that 72% have positive views of Muslims. What can the party do to change their attitude?
I can tell you, I don't believe that the Conservative Party of Canada, I don't believe for 1 second they have a negative outlook when it comes to our Muslim community. I don't believe that for a second. I'm not suggesting, as in all of society, there are people who have biases and hatreds. But so we, I'm sure, have a few as well. But as an organization, as a leadership, absolutely, categorically not true. Not true. And in fact, by the way, I talked a little earlier about the two demographics. The #1 language spoken in the city of Ottawa after English is Arabic, by the way. 180,000 Ottawans identify Arabic as their first language in their home. I don't believe for 1 second. I do agree that post 9/11 there was an ignorant anti-Muslim sentiment among some groups because people didn't understand. They don't understand the difference. They can't even separate countries in the Middle East or North Africa, let alone understand the difference between communities or extremism or radicalism or understanding of the faith, right? But I do not believe for 1 second. And in fact, I would say it is the opposite. Is that clear?
Somebody else. Go ahead, sir.
In your speech, I'm Dennis Farrow, I
Dennis.
work for the Transportation Safety Board, the federal
Yep.
government. In your speech, you talked about Canada being so much better off than the rest of the world as far as financial outlook. But it drives me insane. I mean, I come from the city of Nepean, and I love the fact that when Ben Franklin was around, every dollar that I gave the city of Nepean went towards, helping the city of Nepean.
Yeah.
The pay-as-you-go plan. If you want that sports arena, well, you better wait 10 years so we have the money in the bank and then we'll build it. But anyways, the thing is, I also, I go to the Ottawa 67s games. I sit next to an aviation legend, founder of COPA, owner of Air Laurentian, and he is very much against this F-35 program.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard for you guys to talk about, the Conservative Party to talk about fiscal responsibility and all this stuff, and when people are losing their jobs and blah, blah, blah. And then this F-35 thing, if someone comes up to me and says, well, your party is messing around with this F-35, and I'm a pilot, I love flying, I love aviation, I love the aerospace industry, but people in the know, this F-35 is insane to me.
Well, I mean, we're going to separate this now, okay? Because from an operational perspective, we need a new aircraft. You would agree with that?
Sure.
We need new aircraft. So, and we spent, I think, $1 billion plus to refurbish the 18s, right? To ensure we could get to a new aircraft. So when you start down a path, and I'm sure you know this is more than maybe most people here, including me, when you start down a path of rebuilding something so technologically challenging as a new aircraft, you're on the path, and you have to start focusing on an entity or an aircraft. I mean, I've been involved in $1.5, $150, $200 million projects where a year down, having spent 10% of the budget, there are some changes that come up, and I have to start changing my focus, and the cost might increase. Typically, they were when I was with the RCMP, and they were in the technology side, not in the operational aircraft side. But the reality is, you still need a new aircraft. I don't know that we've explained well enough to Canadians the realities of why we need new aircraft. Because that's important for Canadians to understand that. It's not because people want to spend $15 or $25 billion for the sake of spending it. We have the second largest country in the world. We have a huge support system across the north, east and west that we have to have aircraft capacity with. I don't know what we would have done other than getting into bed with someone to start building aircrafts. And to try and do it on our own as a country, I don't believe, first of all, it wouldn't have been any amount. There was no money that we could have spent that would have got us there on our own. So we have to get into with a group of people who have some like thinking, whether it was Norway or other countries, Australia, and start building an aircraft to replace what we have. So we have to replace it. I think everybody will acknowledge we have to have a new aircraft. I do agree that we need to explain better why that's important. And I do agree, and I think everybody would agree now with the report from the Auditor General and others, that we have to talk about full costs. Although I don't know that I would have, I mean, I've rolled out some pretty large projects. I would never have looked at the cost of having people drive the car as part of the expense of the car. And in fact, here in Ottawa, we bought 150 police cars a year. I didn't include 150 cops in my costing, right? And I didn't include the fuel of 150 cars in my costing, or the tires, or actually even the fan belts. I included the cost of a $24,000 Impala. That's what I included. So I get that now they want it done differently, but ultimately I wouldn't have done it differently than that either. I would have said I'm buying 150 cars, $24,000 a piece, here's the cost. Same as I would have said I'm buying this many 35s and here's what the cost will be. But I don't know that we've explained it well operationally. That's my big, if I have a concern, it's around the General and his staff explaining to Canadians why they're needed first and foremost. I mean, we've been in war, Libya in a war, Afghanistan, protracted war. We're still defending a nation on at least 3 sides with aircraft. I think it's important for us to have the best there is, and I'll tell you, we have the best pilots in the world, the best in the world. They deserve aircraft that are going to be safe and going to work. And if there needs to be a shift, I'm sure we'll see Parliament and the government and Pierre's folks make a shift away from that aircraft. But the reality is they haven't bought the planes yet.
Chief, it must have stealth capability.
Chief, that's it, exactly. It does have to have stealth, because stealth on non-stealth, stealth wins every time, by the way.
Okay. I'll just allow that follow-up. Go ahead, yeah.
I guess one other concern I have is with the cuts of programs and stuff in the government and whatnot. I mean, clearly we want to be efficient and all that. I hope that we're making sensible. You hear stories about closing an office in Verne and relocating everyone to Kelowna, or not everyone, the
positions.
People. Yeah, relocating them, so moving expenses to Kelowna when the Kelowna office is going to close in a year. And then where are you going to move these people to? And you get this sort of feeling that, well, I guess whenever the government does anything, it's extremely inefficient and wasteful. And, so this shell game here is, but the other thing is the good programs. There was a Convair and Twin Otter that was being used for, in the old alert hangars. A very small program by Environment Canada. I guess the people in Environment Canada didn't understand it, but it actually had contracts where they would test packages before they went up into space. Yeah. And I was told that this program was actually making money, and Environment Canada just closed the whole program down.
But what was the biggest complaint from Canadians 5 years ago? Government's too wasteful, spends too much money. And if you're going to be fiscally conservative, you can't not be fiscally conservative. So you can't grow or allow to continue a government that the public doesn't support from a financial perspective. There's not a person out there who thinks a cut doesn't hurt them, right? Not one of us. Geez, I wish they'd kept that. But the reality is, when you have to cut money, you have to cut to get to zero, because we need to balance our budget, you have to cut somewhere. And ultimately, we have contracts, whether it moves on in the weeds, particularly in the Verne or wherever. At the end of the day, you still have contracts with employees, and you have to allow them to bump, so you might end up moving them. The reality is, Canadians expected us to cut costs, and it's never easy.
I'm going to take one
Last